Shalom. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. Who do we have?
Hi, my name is Corey, and I'm from South Dakota. Why is the Good Samaritan in the Gospel? Who are they?
What's the Good Samaritan is in the Gospels? Is it something that needs to be studied?
The story of what's called the Good Samaritan is found in the 10th chapter of the book of Luke. It's really an awful story, even though whenever we think about the term Good Samaritan, it sounds great, Good Samaritan, but really the story is designed to highlight the brutality and the heartlessness and the banal nature of the Jew in contrast to the Samaritan. What's the Samaritan? We think today of a Good Samaritan as somebody who helps out another person on the street. It's like a good thing. It's very positive in American culture or in the Christian world. But the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10 goes right away through from in chapter 30 and chapter 10 verse 29, 30, 31, 32 is really an awful story. It's a story of a man who's laying on the street, who's dying, and what happened is he was terribly wounded. Now, what happens next is that a priest, which means a Jew, but not any Jew, a Jew of very, very high status, just passed by on the road, sees this guy who's laying there, who's terribly wounded, who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and the Jew goes, and just passes by and lets this man who's within a breath of dying, ignores his need, ignores his plight. Along comes, we're told in verse 33, along comes a Samaritan. Now, who are the Samaritans? The Samaritans are the bad guys, really. You would never know it unless you study Tanakh. But the Samaritans were brought to the land of Israel by Assyria some 7 centuries before the Christian century, and they became very quickly the enemies of the Jewish people, who sought to undermine Jewish life in the land of Israel and impede the building of the Second Temple. They were just problem. They were like the terrorists who were just making our lives miserable. That's who the Samaritans were. So the Samaritans were, you wouldn't know this unless you're reading Tanakh and you're reading Ezra and Nehemiah, and you find out who these people really were. They were problem people. And so the Samaritan is an antagonistic group that we are told in the Gospels who are wrong about where the holy city is. They think it's Gerizim. Jesus corrects them and says, no, it actually is Jerusalem. The Jews know what they're talking about. But along comes a Samaritan, and the book of Luke wants to juxtapose the two. And the Samaritan sees this fellow on the road, and he had great compassion on him. And he went over to him, and he put bandages on him, on his wounds. He put oil and water on him, and he took care of him until the man finally departed. So the story is saying, look at the disgusting Jew, the villain, who couldn't care less about a man dying on the road, and along comes this non-Jew, this enemy of the Jew, and the Samaritan has compassion on this person. Now, what do you think a story like this from Luke chapter 10, what do you think that conveys? Well, what it conveys is that the Jews are heartless, they're banal, they're enemies of God, and this Gentile may not be, the Samaritans are not portrayed, or Gentiles are not portrayed in the Gospels as knowledgeable or smart or cunning like the Jew, but they kind of care more about the Jew. So we hear the term Good Samaritan, but it's really an odious story that seeks to portray the Jew as heartless. And you see, today we had in Haiti not long ago, there was an earthquake in Haiti, and so many thousands were killed. Who was the first to be there setting up hospitals to heal these people? Israel, the state of Israel was there with hospitals, mobile hospitals, before anyone was there, taking care of thousands of them, the biggest hospitals in Haiti. You know what Haiti is? Haiti is in the Caribbean. You know how far away? It's 6,000 miles away from Israel. It's another people, another race. They're people who, some Christians, some are voodoo and so on, but we care. We were there first, we were the biggest, and even the media, it's just the opposite of Luke 10. The media couldn't ignore it, and they said the fact that none of the Arab countries are there. Israel got there before the United States got there, even though Haiti is just a few miles away from Florida. It's right in the Caribbean. But Israel was there first to take in. They had a big hospital set up to care. They had search teams to find people who were stuck under the rubble. And you know what happened a few years ago in Iran? Iran sits on an earthquake fault, and they had a terrible earthquake where thousands of people were killed. Now, when there's an earthquake, you have to act very quickly, because people do survive the earthquake, because they get caught under the rubble, and they sort of have big large pieces of building on top of them, and they're now in these little pockets where they have a limited amount of air, and if they're lucky they have some water, but they don't have much time to live. You have to act very quickly to rescue survivors, and very special techniques. And the problem is that if you start moving pieces of fallen building, it causes shifts that can crush survivors. Israel specializes in this. Israel has special rescue, robotic equipment, special dogs trained for this, everything they have, because Israel had to deal with suicide bombing. And here Iran had so many thousands of people who they knew very likely survived the earthquake, but were going to die, were going to perish if they were. And Israel offered, here Iran wants to kill us. They plot our destruction every day. And Israel offered Iran, said, we will come to help you with this rescue. And you know what Iran did? Iran said, no, we don't want any Zionist help. And they died. And Iran hates the Jews more than they care about their own citizens. So this story of the Good Samaritan in Luke is a crime to put that kind of story in, because it's designed. Remember I said earlier that these stories in the Christian Bible are exactly the kind of anecdotal devices that are used that poison the mind of the Christian against the Jew. Christians are good people, but they're vulnerable to this kind of storytelling that's so toxic.